Week 10 of the fantasy football season, and here's a few quarterbacks. I have his sleepers this week. The first guy, Kenny Pickett of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So Kenny Pickett, it's been another struggling season for him, no doubt about it, this year for Pickett, where his high's been 22 fantasy points this year. And besides that, pretty much 12, 15 fantasy points he's been maxing out at. So the last few games for Pickett, Week 7 at the Rams, 230 pass yards in that one, a rushing touchdown. Week 8 versus Jacksonville, 73 pass yards. Only 10 rushing yards, leaving that game with the shoulder injury. And last week in Week 9 versus Tennessee, 160 pass yards, a touchdown. So right now, offensively, they got some decent weapons, I believe, is this Pittsburgh Steelers team. You got Deontay Johnson and George Pickens, a pretty good 1-2 combo at the wide receiver position. You got Calvin Austin, you got Harris and Warren, a decent tandem in the backfield. And this week here in a decent matchup versus the Green Bay Packers, where their defense has been hit or miss this season. Some games they're playing great D, like we saw last week, and some games they're not doing much. But Kenny Pickett hasn't been that great, no doubt about it. But with 4 teams on bye this week, and he has decent weapons, and it's a home game for Pittsburgh. If you're in the deepest of leagues, I think he could be a sleeper option and possibly get 15, 18 fantasy points. And he's available right now in 83% of fantasy leagues. The next quarterback, I have his sleeper, Taylor Heinicke. Atlanta Falcons. To Taylor Heinicke, he's been bounced around the league a little bit the last few seasons, but he's a gamer. He's a guy that goes out there, and he's a gunslinger, is Taylor Heinicke, and he's not afraid to take some chances and get the ball down the field. So this week here, pretty good matchup at the Arizona Cardinals that give up the 9th most fantasy points to quarterbacks on the season. So Heinicke, he's out there in a bunch of fantasy leagues at 84%. He's got good weapons. Kyle Pitts, Drake London, Jonnu Smith, who's really emerged once again this season. Bijan Robinson, Algier out of the backfield. So you got a decent core of guys around him. His first 2 outings of the season, Week 8 at Tennessee, coming in the third quarter in that game for Desmond Ridder. Even though I thought Heinicke should have been the starter earlier than Week 8, 175 pass yards, a touchdown, 14 rush yards. And last week in a tough loss versus the Vikings, 268 pass yards, a touchdown, and an interception with 20 rush yards. So this week here in a potential shootout at Arizona with Kyler Murray back in the lineup for this Arizona Cardinal team, I think Taylor Heinicke could go out there and give you a serviceable ball game, and he's a sleeper option this week. In the third and final quarterback I have as a sleepers, Mac Jones of the New England Patriots. So Mac Jones, it hasn't been that great of a season, obviously, for him and the Patriots, 2-7 on the season. But this week here, a pretty decent matchup versus the Indianapolis Colts that give up the 11th most fantasy points to quarterbacks on the season. And Mac Jones, I know the weapons are limited. Juju Smith-Schuster, Hunter Henry, who's been up and down this season, finding the end zone a few times. And now Demario Douglas is starting to emerge a little bit, and Stevenson catching the ball out of the backfield. So this week here in a game where I think it's going to be mid-teens, low 20s between these two teams in Germany. We saw last week with 2 offensive juggernauts, only a 21-14 final with the Chiefs winning that game. So the last few games here for Mac Jones, Week 8 at Miami, 161 pass yards, 2 touchdowns, and INT. And Week 9 versus Washington, 220 pass yards, a touchdown, and INT. So this week, anywhere from 15, 17 fantasy points, I think Mac Jones could go out there and give fantasy owners. And right now, he's available in 88% of fantasy leagues. So that's a few quarterbacks I have as sleepers for Week 10 of the fantasy football season.